This clip is brought to you by SaveWithConrad.com.
Well, we're not going to be taking it out of the check today. We're talking about all things Mid-Atlantic Wrestling. Of course, last week you and Paul did a nice little watch along. And now we're going to pick it up where we left off. April of 85. You and I ran through March of 85, but you're going to start April of 85 on April 2nd in Spartanburg, South Carolina at the Memorial Auditorium. It's a TV taping for Worldwide, and they ran a little promotion there where the first 500 fans in attendance received a free t-shirt. And you probably needed one of those because you're working double duty here. You're going to team with Buddy Landell to take on Sam Houston and Denny Brown. Of course, you guys are on the A side of that one. But then there's a dark match with you and Manny Fernandez. And man, you and Manny, y'all were heating up in a hurry.
Yeah. And you know, the thing about that dark match, it served a lot of purposes. You could announce it to the public as something that they could be sure they were going to get. In those days, they got it, and it would be considered a main event. You know, me just getting there, getting put in that spot, from a positioning standpoint, it made you look like, okay, they are going to go with this guy. And, you know, Manny and I clicked pretty quickly, and that became a thing for a while.
Yeah, for a while indeed. The next day you're in Raleigh at the Dorton Arena, and once again working with Manny. You pick up the win there. The following day you're off, a rare off day. But on April 5th, you're once again working with Manny Fernandez, this time to a no contest in Columbia, South Carolina. You're at the Township Auditorium. We've spoken a little bit about Dorton Arena and how much I love the arena and how cool it looks, but Tony Schiavone just said it was hot and it was a dump and it was miserable. Did you have any favorite buildings in the Crockett territory? A building in particular where you just knew, I like the town, I like the arena, I like the people, I like the accommodations? Any of that stick out?
Well, the easy go-tos were the ones that were close, you know, Charlotte, obviously, you know, Greensboro, all those that were close. Columbia was one that I favored because of the way it was built. You know, it was one of those arenas that, you know, it was like built almost straight up, like the seats in the upper deck were like almost over the ring. And that was a cool environment. Loved Richmond because, you know, that was a big arena geared for big shows and held a lot of people, a lot of great buildings. Acoustics were always a good thing. If you were in an arena that had some really good acoustics and everything sounded loud, and, you know, because the noise goes straight up, there was a slight delay. So when it was a full, it was just a funky atmosphere. But, you know, some of in those days, especially when we first got there, business was not the best yet. So they would opt to go to smaller arenas, especially for television. And for me, I like to sweat anyway. I'm a sweater. I'm one of those guys that loves to sweat when I want to sweat, but I can't stand it when I don't. I bet you're one of those guys.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, being on that TV and having a good sweat going, it was just conducive. And, you know, I think the fans even, you know, for those towns, once they got a sweat and they looked around and realized they were soaked, then, hey, what are you going to do about it? Let's just go ahead and have a good time. So it made for a great atmosphere.
Let's talk about your next bout here. Stafford Senior High School. That's real. Fredericksburg, Virginia, April 11th. You and Manny are going to go to a double count out. You're going to be at the Scope in Norfolk on the next day, the 12th. You're going to fight Manny Fernandez to a no contest. You're working with Manny a lot. I'm sure you're getting somewhat of a routine together. Who was typically calling the matches? Did you have different styles of matches that you would do? I mean, we've heard sometimes where I think Jim Ross a few weeks ago on Grilling JR heard Terry Funk and Harley Race talking, and he said something like, hey, are we going to do the St. Louis finish or the Florida finish? And then we've even heard on some of the ladder matches that would happen on house shows where guys would say things like, hey, are they getting the A match, the B match, or the C match? Did you have some sort of a formula that you and Manny would rely on to put together your matches when you're working so often?
I don't think we were that advanced, and it worked enough to actually have an A, B, or C match. But after you've worked with a guy, back in those days, 10, 12, 15 times, and a lot of those were days in a row, you would just have a little bit of a routine down to the point that if I grabbed you in a headlock and I said, hey, drop down twice, backhand, 7, 8, 9 weeks after about that 9th week, when I grabbed that headlock, you knew what we were doing because of where it was in the match. You knew it was, I didn't have to call the whole thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We were just in a spot that, maybe I had grabbed an arm to start off and he reversed it and I reversed it back and took him down by the hair and he nipped up and gave me a big chop. Maybe that was the lead in spot to that next bigger spot. So if we did that, he knew without me saying a word where we were in the match, and we just continued on with our routine. Now, a lot of times something would happen. Maybe they wouldn't react to the backhand, or they would really react to the backhand, and just on the fly, you would just switch it up because you got a different reaction for what you were shooting for or expected. It was still, Conrad, it's always been that when the business is at its best, it's in an ad lib situation where you're really just going out there and rocking back and forth and fighting, and whatever a guy gives you, you take advantage of it, and vice versa. And that's when the business was really the best. There wasn't an ongoing conversation ever in any match that I was in, because it just, if you're talking that much, then you're not really listening to the audience. And that's the key.
Well, I get it. It's a wrestling podcast, but he's saving us money on our mortgage. Do you really trust this process? The reviews don't lie. 5-star review after 5-star review. We make it fast, we make it easy, and it's no cost or obligation. Give us a shot to earn your business. I'm telling you, you'll be glad you did, especially if you like keeping more of your own money. You don't need perfect credit or money out of your pocket. So what are you waiting for? Hurry to savewithconrad.com. April 13th, 1985, the WTBS show, we see Shivani interview Ole and Arn talking about Manny and Thunderbolt. And then Ole and Arn are going to tag up to get a win over Gene Ligon and Rocket King. Later that night, you're going to have 3,464 fans at the Greensboro Coliseum. Manny Fernandez will pick up a win over Arn there. On the 14th, the very next day, we're doing a no DQ match in Asheville with Manny Fernandez. And that night, Georgia Championship Wrestling is running the Omni. And what do you know? Manny Fernandez and the national tag team champion Thunderbolt Patterson are going to take on Arn Anderson and the national tag team champion Ole Anderson. That goes to a DQ. But of course, Ole is still heavily involved in all things Georgia Championship Wrestling. He's got points in the promotion, et cetera, et cetera. Chat me up. What do you remember about working the Omni in this hot angle with your brother/cousin against Thunderbolt and Manny?
So let me get this right. The tag belts were split and one member was on each team of this.
You got it.
That alone, as a wrestling fan, piques my interest a little bit, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
And it didn't occur that many times, and to have those championships, one on Thunderbolt, one on Ole, but Ole was on my team and he was on Manny's. It just made for, okay, which is he going to make the more important? And it was just an interesting dynamic that you didn't see very often. The Omni was one of those places that Thunderbolt, that would be like he would have been the home team there, I would think, because he lived there for years and years and years. He popped in and out on that television. Generations at that point had followed him. So Manny was the new hot kid on the block. He was the guy that, he would fight you, and he made it interesting. It was good chemistry for him to be fighting the Andersons. It was similar styles. He didn't mind roughing it up. So the Omni, was the place, and it was the Madison Square Garden of the South. So the tone was set, the situation was set, the drama was set, and it just made for a good dynamic.
A great dynamic, and it's in the Omni. I mean, that's like, as a fan growing up, that's like your Madison Square Garden, and the hits keep coming. The next day, you're in Altoona, Pennsylvania. Probably one of the first times you've wrestled up there. Manny Fernandez and yourself are in the main event for Jim Crockett. It is, shall we say, a B show. You've got DJ defeating Red Walsh, Johnny Weaver defeating LP, DJ defeating Yukon Bob, Crusher Khrushchev defeating Jimmy Jackson, and finally, in the main event, Manny Fernandez and Arn Anderson. Woof.
Why are you giggling?
Well, it just tickles me because here's the thing. The next day, you're at the Agricultural Hall in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It's a 4-match show. Sam Houston versus RPM number 1, Pez Watley versus RPM number 2, Tommy Rich versus Crusher Khrushchev, and then you again with Manny in the main events. You're back.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson. Thanks for checking out the podcast here on YouTube. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and the notifications bell so you get a notice anytime we upload some new content. And go save yourself some money right now. If you're in a 30-year loan or you have credit card debt, it's not a matter of if I can save you money. It's a matter of how much. Find out right now for free at SaveWithConrad.com.